So battery life, or the lack thereof, is actually a real problem for Android phones today, and it seems to be the next threshold that OEMs really need to pass. And like most things in Android, they've chosen the brute force method. So the Lenovo Vibe P1 has a 5000 mAh battery, while the Gionee Marathon M5, which is its closest competitor in this range, has a 6020 mAh battery. But I have to say that these are the first few phones that I see who are actually taking the battery issue head on. There have been phones before which have said that they'll provide long battery life, but none of them really take you past a day. And to be honest, Android phones really need to work on the battery life. Before I get on with the Vibe P1's review, I'm just going to give you a quick roundup of the specs. The phone has a 13 megapixel camera on the back, a 5 megapixel camera on the front. There's a 5.5 inch 1080p display. It runs on the Snapdragon 615 SoC. It has a fingerprint sensor at the front of the phone, and there's this alert slider type button, the same button that we saw on the OnePlus 2. But this button, instead of changing the alert mode, it takes the phone from the regular mode to the power saver mode. So I'm going to speak more about the power saver mode in a bit. Let's start with the battery though. So the Vibe S1 has a 5000 mAh battery, and that is pretty massive. It promises a lot of battery life, but what I have to say is that this phone, even though it does very well, it does not match up to the Gionee Marathon M5. So the Vibe S1 can do about 12 and a half hours in the Geekbench 3 battery test, which is about half of the Marathon M5, and we also saw similar results in the looping video test. So if you talk about the overall battery life, it's not bad. This phone should easily get you 1.5 days. It did for me, so it should for you too. And if you do use your phone a lot, it'll still get you over a day definitely. My problem with the Vibe S1 though is that because of this power saver button, this phone really is dependent on its power saver modes, which is a problem for me because so the Marathon M5 would have given you 2 days of battery life without using the power saver. This phone depends on the power saver modes to give you as much battery life as possible. And when you turn to the power saver mode, the problem is that it basically turns your phone into a feature phone, and you get 6 apps on your screen, none of which will be data using apps. So you can't put your browser or things like that on the screen. You can choose some of the apps that you put here, but mostly they're just going to be clock, radio, calendar, contacts, phone, SMS. So your phone will basically become a feature phone. Now that's not what you're paying 16,000 rupees for. And that is where I think the Vibe P1 really lacks, and I would have to choose the Gionee Marathon M5 if I wanted a really good battery life. Moving on to the display then, this phone really does not just make it about its battery. It has a 1080p 5.5 inch display. So the display size is the same as the Marathon M5. But even though this is a 1080p display and it has a larger 401 ppi pixel density, the screen is quite dim, and it overshadows the fact that this is a sharper display, and the colors don't really look as good as they did on the Vibe S1's AMOLED, even though that AMOLED display is only 720p. Again, in the display section, if I really needed to choose, I would go for the Marathon M5, and that is simply because this display is just too dim. I can't use it in direct sunlight very well, and it overall doesn't really look good. It has a mattish kind of feel in some apps and all, but that really doesn't suit my purposes. Next up, I'll talk about the build of the phone. So the phone is built very well. It actually has the same build as the Marathon M5 if you really look at it. The camera placement is different. Overall, this phone has a build similar to the Marathon M5. It looks a lot similar, only the camera placement is different, and there's no metallic frame separately. The phone is made of plastic, but there's a metallic finish to it, which is something we really like. And overall, if you ask me, this is not a badly built phone at all. It's actually a very well built phone in the sense that it looks premium enough, it doesn't look cheap. It doesn't look like a phone that is thick just because it has battery. It's thick, it's heavy, but it's lighter than the Marathon M5. It weighs 186 grams. It is thicker than the Marathon M5 at 9.9 mm, but it really does not make a difference to your overall usage. So I quite like it. If you like big screen phones, you will like this phone. On the performance front, the Vibe P1 runs on a Snapdragon 615. Now this is the first area where the Vibe P1 really outshines the Marathon M5. And the Vibe P1 Snapdragon 615, though the Snapdragon 615 is not the best performer in the market, it's still better than what the Marathon M5 can provide. So what happens here is that if you're looking for really high performance, then you're of course going to go for the Vibe S1 by Lenovo or the OnePlus X from OnePlus. But between this and the Marathon M5, this phone definitely provides better performance. The benchmarks give a very good idea here. So the Vibe P1 falls just short of what the OnePlus X and the Lenovo Vibe S1 can do. So if you're talking about pure performance, then yes, this is a phone that is better in terms of performance than the Marathon M5. But having said that, that performance is also affecting its battery life. In order to churn out that performance, it is using more battery life, and that is perhaps one of the reasons why this phone does not last as long as the Marathon M5. So overall, yes, if you really want that performance, then this phone can still give you good battery life and compromises on performance less than the Marathon M5. But I would have to say that the Marathon M5 has just too high a battery life for this. Talking about the 13 megapixel camera on the back, this is one place where the Marathon M5 and the Vibe P1 are very similar. The 13 megapixel camera on the back can do very well as long as you give it good light conditions. And under good light conditions, the phone can actually take some really nice shots. They're sharp, the colors are really nice, they're actually well balanced colors, it doesn't overdo anything. It does quite well, it doesn't overexpose. My problem with the Vibe P1 though is that it tends to lack in terms of the stabilization. So images are often wobbly. It doesn't really compensate for your hand moving a little bit. Of course, I'm not talking about OIS here. I'm just simply talking about digital stabilization. Also, the Marathon M5 was pretty bad when it came to low light. There was a lot of noise. But the Vibe P1 is even worse because these images are really not usable under low light. The images are darker. There is noise, not as much as the Vibe P1, but they're so dark that you won't really be using them. To conclude, it's really difficult to pass an absolute verdict about the Vibe P1. This is definitely one of Lenovo's best phones till date. But then again, if you want pure battery life, then the Marathon M5 would be the right choice. And you'd have to pay Rs 2000 extra for it. That means that the Vibe P1 is cheaper than the Marathon M5, can perform better than the Marathon M5, and provides battery life which is still good but not as good as the M5. So this is what I'm saying. If you really want to buy this phone, go ahead and buy it because the fingerprint sensor is a huge bonus for this phone. It costs less than the Marathon M5. It can provide you reasonably good battery life, actually more than usual battery life. The performance is not bad. The display is a weakness, yes, but then again, you're also paying a little less money, you're saving 2000 rupees. So the Vibe P1 is definitely a phone that you can buy, but if you want pure battery life and you have 2000 rupees extra, then the Marathon M5 is the phone to go for.